is that we actually need to be in the right places in terms of where our customers are at. So as we're starting to think about, the notion of omni-channel marketing and how to do it right, I think we should start off with the basic premise that you don't need to be everywhere, but you actually need to be where your customers are, right? So when we start to think about where are your customers, that is where we actually have to get into a much bigger conversation, which is if your customer is on Snapchat, if your customer is on Instagram, if your customer is on, TikTok, then those are the platforms you actually need to be on, as opposed to this concept of I need to be on Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, Twitch, all of the things, right? So as opposed to looking at this from an all of the things component, I actually believe it's really important to start to drill it down and say, well, where do my customers actually live, right? So the very first thing that we need to start to think about is, what's the nature of your kind of customer segmentation? And then we also need to take a step back and say, what platforms are they on? And then we start to do our planning, our campaign planning. And a huge part of campaign planning, a big part of that actually has to do with setting up your back end and kind of really understanding not just the content that you're programming, but then also aside from content, right? How and what are the ways in which you're actually measuring the efficacy of those different channels? And so when we start to ask ourselves, how do we measure the efficacy of it? Well, the number we like to look at is something called a blended cost of acquisition, right? So your acquisition cost, we look at it, what it is in terms of all of the customers coming in. So Gina, thanks for connecting with us. Women over 45 for social media. Great. I would actually say that you're probably looking at Facebook as a huge driver. You're probably also looking at, depending on the segmentation, in terms of categories, Pinterest is a huge category for home goods and home shopping. So depending on kind of your product categories, you might be looking at that as well. If your product lends itself to tutorials and how-tos, you might also be looking at YouTube as a platform. So the best thing also, Gina, to find out in terms of where your customers are going for social media is to ask. So if you're ever wondering, how do I actually get more information about my target customer, I suggest doing either some focus groups, some surveys. Some of you guys who've been following me for some time, may have recently seen that I did an article on Forbes about the concept of demand side product development and demand side planning. And I reference a lot of Bob Mesta's work on the jobs to be done theory and methodology. Now, that I think is probably one of the best places in terms of understanding how to actually do customer segmentation, and understanding your customer. I think that is probably the best thing you can do is probably use a jobs to be done framework. However, there are other ways in which you can get that information, certainly doing surveys, et cetera, but asking, I would say the worst thing Gina and anyone can ever do is say, oh, I'm just going to assume that I know things, right? The smartest people assume nothing and actually know how to ask the right questions. And so what you want to do is start to ask the right questions and start to ask them from your customers. And then also all the social media platforms usually will have some sort of statistical report that goes over the breakdown of how efficient, how efficient it is, right, for you to be on their platform, because they actually want to be attracting the right people. So remember, guys, sorry, that was kind of gross. So remember, omni-channel is not about being everywhere. Omni-channel is about being where your customers are, right? And then the next phase of that is understanding your customer acquisition cost, right? So that blended customer acquisition cost, is really important, right? So oftentimes someone will say, oh, what's your CAC, right? What's your customer acquisition cost? And what does that mean? How do you actually figure that out? Well, it has to do with the cost that you're spending on your advertising, plus, and then you take a look at that number, and you take a look at the number of new customers that have come in, right? And you divide that number, and you say, all right, well, I had 20 customers come in, and I spent $3,000 on advertising. So my cost of acquisition, right, for those 20 customers is going to be 3,000 divided by 20, right? That's your cost of acquisition. Now, every single channel will have its own acquisition costs, right? So Facebook will have its own acquisition, Pinterest, etc. We call it blended because we take a look at all of your channels together. We say, okay, well, what is it costing for you to actually get a repeat customer, to get a customer? Now, the next component here with omnichannel is looking at your repeat customers. So who are your repeat customers? Where are they coming in from? Is it your newsletter, right? Generally speaking, repeat customers are heavily motivated and driven by newsletters. Why? Because that tends to be where the discounts come in. That tends to be where your most loyal fans come in. And personally, I would say that it is, personally, I think it's one of those things where it's like, you will have your best customers, follow you, subscribe to your newsletter. You will have your customers who maybe are aspirational or who have purchased from you but are more aspirational, be heavily engaged on your social. And then as far as your new audiences, right, that can really and should be tested on multiple platforms. Now, looking at holiday and kind of looking at this concept of be everywhere during the holiday season, the notion here that, again, be everywhere is not only a bad idea, but it's also a bad idea in the context of holiday because holiday is very expensive. So again, one of the things that I really espouse from a long-term marketing strategy is the following. Months that are not dedicated towards holiday selling, meaning highly competitive holidays during the year. So right now we're looking at holidays in terms of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then moving into the more traditional religious holidays, right, in terms of December. And when it comes to other holidays, you also have Labor Day weekend, you have July 4th weekend. There are lots of other holidays during the year. During those non-holiday time periods, you should be running advertising. You should really build out your funnel. Stop slacking on it, build out your funnel, put the money into it. If you don't have the money to put into it, start small, grow it, get the right people on it. Remember, we're in fashion. It costs money to play in this game. If you don't have the resources to play the game, go get resources, right? Or get scrappy, but realize your growth is going to be small and incremental, right? And so don't have such high expectations, right? If you want to stay in this game, you're going to have to be persistent. Especially if you don't have the resources. So anyway, when it comes to looking at advertising during these off non-holiday time periods, what I think is really important to realize is that is the time to be investing in advertising dollars. You want to be cultivating your audiences during these non-peak time periods so that when you do get to these holiday time periods, you will be doing retargeting and not spending a cajillion dollars. Cajillion, it's funny. I just saw Miranda July's new movie. Small plug-in for her called Cajillionaire, which was amazing. She's so rad. So go watch that movie, Cajillionaire. I think it was on Netflix. I think so. But anyway, so you're not going to be spending a cajillion dollars on competing with like Target and like bigger brands like, Brother Vellies or La Flor Randall or any of the other companies that have a larger budget, right? You're going to be spending your money on retargeting. You'll be spending your money on maybe doing a lookalike audience. But guys, the holiday time period, if you stack this up properly, is going to be an amazing time period because you're going to be selling to your most brand loyal customers. And you're going to be getting them to purchase from you at a really great acquisition cost because they're already in your funnel. So, but if you find yourself kind of coming up against the holidays and you're like, well, what the hell am I going to do? I don't have the resources to do the advertising like Syama's telling me, but I know that I need to be there. And then you need to double down on like particular platforms, right? You need to be doubling down on the platforms that are going to help give you the most visibility. So pick one, right? Pick two. Dedicate yourself to it, right? Ramp up your newsletter marketing, right? When you're starting to think about, where can I sell my goods, right? West Coast Craft, right? A lot of these places are starting to open up pop-up shops for the holiday. Yeah, it's COVID. And yes, there are pop-up shops. People are still looking at purchasing things in person. So do not discount the power of what you do have at your disposal. I think that's really important. So Gina, you have a follow-up comment here. Your challenge is consultants want me to pay them for 6 months throwing darts at a wall in order to get this blended number you're referencing. Yeah, so here's the crazy thing about your comment. So the first thing is, yes, consultants cost money. So you are correct. I cost money. So that is correct. So throwing darts at a wall in order to get this blended number. So the thing with this, and the reason why there's so much frustration around marketing, is that there is no formula. You can hire the most brilliant marketer. I seem to consider myself one. And depending on the project, the budget, the creative assets, and what you're working with, marketers are more like conductors of orchestras than they are, the soloist at the opera, right? Like you don't go, the soloist at the opera is like fully contained, and everything is in and of, your lead opera singer, right? It's all contained. Superstar marketing specialists are conductors of orchestras. You need these things in alignment, these things in alignment. You actually need to have all of the components together, and then you need to have someone who you trust and who has a reputation to say, okay, here's how we're going to best optimize your orchestra to be able to play the most beautiful music based on your creative assets, your budget, your merchandising strategy, what the market is looking for. Here's how you're going to position it. So it really becomes like conducting an orchestra rather than being the opera singer. And so I think, Gina, it's important to kind of flip the script here in terms of the expectations of what it is you're hiring someone to do. Now, when it comes to other like high performance individual autonomous positions within the marketing sphere, your Facebook ad specialist, like, yes, like now you start to get more granular. Like, if his or hers budget is too low, she may not get much results, right? You need to have the right budget. You need to be testing. You need to have the right creative assets. We're living in a highly visual landscape where like the shit's got to look good. I'm tired of people saying like, well, I'm going to do ads. It's like, don't do ads, go do a photo shoot, right? You have to learn how to kind of do resource allocation in ways that are going to make the most sense for your business. Okay, so back to kind of looking at this concept of omni-channel. Now, traditionally, guys, omni-channel has really just been something that we focused on as we looked at, brick and mortar as omni-channel, selling wholesale as part of an omni-channel strategy, right? We kind of looked at omni as kind of, again, being in all these places. And I'd say the best way to kind of look at this concept moving into Q4 and 2020 and beyond is that it is extremely valuable and really important to say to yourself, like, okay, what are the customer touch points that I can actually commit to for at least a quarter? So that means a quarter of fueling it with the right budget, with the right assets, with the right people to make it moving. What are those positions, right? Like, how do I fulfill this for at least a quarter? Knowing that the first month is going to be ramping up, and also knowing that your experiments should likely be lasting a bit longer than that, right? Ideally, my preference is to have an experiment run 6 months, right? So you get 3 months of buildup and momentum, so then you can capitalize and leverage that the following 3 months, right? So you kind of need a bit of a ramp up period. But at the end of a 3-month engagement on running any sort of advertising experience, you should be able to say, okay, this is working, this isn't working. Do we want to pivot or pursue at this point? But I would give yourself a little bit of runway here in order to see exactly what's going to work and what's not going to work. Now, when it comes to the campaign development, and we talk about omni-channel marketing, the best companies don't just take one asset and image and kind of put it everywhere, right? If you do, you kind of get succumb to this kind of digital fatigue, right? And digital fatigue is just so boring. It's like, yeah, I saw that ad here, I saw that ad there, and sure, like you kind of get some recognition there in terms of the stickiness of the image, but it also shows kind of a lack of creativity. It also shows a lack of messaging. So as you're kind of looking at what the messaging, images, assets, etc., make sure that you vary the kinds of images and assets that you're using. That means, to include static images, GIFs, short form video content. You might be doing some printed mailers. I'm a fan of direct mail. I think direct mail is an amazing component to an omni-channel platform. I would also say that, I got interviewed for an article on Native. They do the organic deodorant, about their new out of home. That's called, it's like OOH is the acronym. But their new, out of home advertising, which is basically billboard campaigns and it's like billboard campaigns and also subway campaigns. And so when we're looking at the different mechanisms by which you can, pull off Omni, we're looking at the full spectrum, I would say, of what Omni can be for you. So that would mean, okay, do we want to have something that is on a billboard? Do we want to test that in Manhattan? Do we want to test doing a direct mailer and also having Instagram advertising? What are the kind of 360 touch points that you're going to be leveraging? Okay, so lots of interesting stuff here in terms of Omni. Want to kind of open this up to any other questions, ideas, concerns that you guys have. Certainly we can kind of, dive in a bit deeper into any one of these components, but would love to be able to, unpack any questions that you guys have. I will also, just so you guys have a heads up, in just a little bit, I'll be hopping on with a few kind of select people to do a, group Q&A session. So if you guys are interested in kind of opening up your books a little bit more, kind of taking a deep dive into what's happening into your business, I would heavily suggest kind of signing up for the Embark.live Makers Row group Q&A, because that I think can be really special. Sometimes it ends up being these really small, private kind of let's get to know each other and workshop your business for a period of time. Other times it is, really just kind of learning from your peers and kind of getting a much better read on business strategy based on what your peers are doing. So that is going to be opening up. We'll be kind of jumping on that in about half an hour. But if you guys don't have any additional questions, I'll kind of leave with some parting words here on omnichannel and marketing in general. Marketing will and should take more money than you think it will. And when we think about, the cost of marketing, while it is reported and can be evaluated on your P&L as a variable expense in terms of your investment into your business, it is really a long-term budget line item, which means this should not be something that you take lightly. It shouldn't be something that you immediately write off as soon as your budget goes down. In fact, it should be something that is a consistent part of your budget on an ongoing basis. So I think that's extremely important. So when you look at your line items and you're looking at, I have X amount of money, how am I going to reinvest that? I would say look at your reinvestment strategy as a marketing first, right? Rather than marketing comes last, right? Marketing's got to come first. In fact, guys, the most successful brands out there lead with a customer-centric marketing first approach. Hands down, that is the way to succeed. Any article you've seen me write, any time I've ever spoken, we do not live in a creative director-led world anymore. We live in a customer-led world, right? We are here to solve struggles. Okay, we got a couple questions. I'm going to plow through them, and then hopefully I'll get to see a few of you guys in our group Q&A. All right. So, all right, Nino. Hey, Boo. Hey, how are you? All right, Stephanie. Which is more popular for fashion sales, Facebook or Amazon? That's a very deep and complicated question, Stephanie. Not one that cannot be answered, but one that is very different. So it is, Amazon is totally different than Facebook by the sheer nature of the connectivity, and the platforms themselves are extremely different. Amazon is so many things. It's a warehousing system. It's a distribution center. It's so different. Facebook is also a revenue stream and a sales channel if you are doubling down on like your Facebook shop. But I would say these are two mutually exclusive strategies, which depending on your brand, your price point, your positioning, could be done in tandem. So you could be doing that together, or it could be separate. So sorry, Stephanie, not the clearest of answers, because the question, I think, is, I think these are mutually exclusive things. I think you could do both. We had another question here, which was coming from Instagram. What is your fashion ad campaign? I don't have a fashion ad campaign. But if the question is, what is a fashion ad campaign, or what does one look like? I can go into a little bit more. Detail here. Nino, I will not marry you, but thank you for that question. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about fashion ad campaigns. So the development of an advertising campaign. When we think about how advertising campaigns get developed, right? When we think about how you produce them, I'd say my biggest piece of feedback here is when you're looking at the execution of your photo shoot, really, and this is like so important, and everyone forgets how to do this. Everyone forgets how to do this, is they, forget that your images and assets actually need to be sized and formatted for things like negative space. So you can put ads on, like you can write graphics on there, you can write text on there. You need some horizontal images, you need vertical images, you need close-up shots, you need lots of assets, right? So when you're going into your photo shoot, remember, like, your photo shoot is probably going to cost you more money than you like, and you're going to need to use it for a long ass time. So like this notion that like you are going to do this photo shoot and only get 8 images out of it is bullshit, right? Like you actually need to like get like 60 images so you can kind of seed the market with them and get the most out of it. And you're going to crop them and do so much more with it, right? So images should be really get the most amount of images you can. All right, so let's see this fashion. Okay, so Yarbrough creates. Okay, awesome. So your question was, you meant to say, what was your favorite fashion ad campaign? Oh my God, I love that. Okay, so hilarious. But thank you for the clarification. So when it comes to my favorite ad campaigns, I mean, it's hard. I've got a lot of love for a few brands that I think, do a really good job. Some of my favorites are like the small brand Stod. I think they're great. I love their creative direction. But really things come down to aesthetics. And just like I will work with clients that I don't love their product, I will also launch marketing campaigns that I'm not always in love with, because it doesn't have to be a beautiful product in order for it to sell. It just has to be the right product at the right time with the right customer. So we've got to start moving ourselves out of the notion of like, I need to look like this brand, or I need to produce like this brand, or it needs to have that feel. It has to be more, again, back to the customer centricity. It really has to be like, what is the customer looking for? What are the components of that, right? Like, how do I build this photo shoot to highlight and give something aspirational to my customer? And that's gonna be extremely different for so many people. I mean, I remember back in the day when I was a buyer, I would buy things that I thought were ugly. Why? Because not everyone in the world is gonna wear a sweater dress like this, right? It's not about my taste, it's about their taste, right? It's about being able to take yourself out of the mix and say, well, what is it that my customers are looking for, and how can I actually give them what their needs are? How do I satisfy that struggle? So I would say your customer centricity should be really just 360 around product development, customer marketing, and all of the ways in which you are kind of building brand, right? Building brand not just for you, but building brand for your customers, so you can maintain a sense of loyalty. All right, guys, that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys for joining. Very excited. Those of you guys who want to, stick around for a small group session, talk about your businesses, talk about marketing more, Feel free to sign up for that. It's gonna be happening shortly. Otherwise, I will see you guys later. And I hope you have a kick-ass week. All right, thanks. Bye.